Okay, that's a restart because I didn't realise I had that camera with the card in it ready to go. So we're ready to go on all fronts. And so what we've got here is Paul's acoustic guitar that he brought over the other day. And this is a remarkable beastie because it's called a Bristol. I haven't seen a pair of these together. No jokes. No, I've never seen more than one. I've never seen any other one, far less a pair. Sexist. Unsubscribe. So what we've got here is a surprisingly good little guitar, and Paul brought it across, and I was struggling to find anything wrong with it. It's made by a company apparently called Saga, which is especially for us old folks on holidays. But it's an amazingly sweet little guitar. Now it is, yeah. We looked at it, and I was very honest with Paul, and I said, actually, apart from the fact the strings are old and horrible, we're kind of heading towards no more adjustment room in here. But actually, it's almost perfect. But knowing that, Paul wanted to do a couple of things to it. He wanted to change the nut out from this new bone one to a Tusq one, which is totally fine by me. And he wanted to try and get a fraction more out of there with a little bit of notching on the top two strings. Excuse me, possibly top three strings. So, and it's an inexpensive guitar in that he got it not for a lot of money, but it's absolutely sweet as anything. And I mean, it doesn't feel a luxury brand. It feels quite humble in its sort of construction and its finish and its materials. But you know what? It's surprisingly good. You just, you know, after all those guitars that you see that are unplayable and costing even more than this, I mean, I'm not saying this is cheap. It's not necessarily cheap, but it's a less known brand. It can't be that cheap because it's got a Fishman in the side, which works, although the tuner doesn't work apparently. But anyway, it's like I say, it's fairly little known brand as far as I know, and that doesn't mean an awful lot. Can you get a view in that? Yay! And like I say, it's not flashy in any way. There's a slight ripple here. It looks sort of, we've got a bit of neck dive, and it's causing a crinkle here. I don't know if we can see it from the side. Actually, you know what? You probably can. You see that? See where it dips down at the front of the hole towards the front of the hole on this side? That's quite hard to show, but there is a little sort of dip here. But that's probably a result of this being pressed in, So anyway, it is a lovely old thing, and currently he's got it playing really nicely, but we're going to go that little bit extra distance. If you're interested in acoustic guitars, down here we've got the back of a Harmony, which is quite interesting because I took this off the other day because it was split, broken, it's kind of fallen apart over the years, and there's this kind of lovely stained horrible thing, but you know, it's like the back of your granny's wardrobe. Anyhow, it's there, and the reason it's there is because it made sense to take it off, and I took off the binding as well so that we could get to it and make some differences. Come into my toilet, and what you can see in here is the rest of it. There's a bit of glue on there, never mind that, but I've sanded out and planed out the permanent, it wasn't badly curved, but it had humps in it, so I've planed them out, and so what we have here is the remainder, sorry about the toilet, the remainder of this beastie kind of ready to go. It's a little bit of a shame because all of the glue is sort of had it, and if I were going to replace all the glue, I'd literally have to take the entire thing apart to all its components, which I don't think is a good idea really. Oh, here's something else. If you like acoustic guitars, I actually salvaged this neck from a Tanglewood the other day because I've got a plan for it when it doesn't involve being part of an acoustic guitar. But if you ever wanted to see a quick cross section of an acoustic guitar's neck joint, see whether you think it's beautifully made or crudely made, there's your cross section. But that little beastie is going to get reborn as a glue-in neck on another creature. So waste not, want not. Couldn't be bothered to fix the body, put it that way. Anyway, so that was a little thing about acoustics. But this little picture here, ignore my invoices. This little picture here is, I'm going to make a plywood clamp to go around that edge of that thing there to be able to sort of clamp it all down. So there, forget the light coloured mark, there's a pencil drawing on there showing the sort of shape of the clamp I'm going to cut out of this. Well, it's 9mm ply, probably ought to be something else, but anyway. So what we've got, I've got all the parts for this. So we've got a slight lowering of the action. It's gone dark. Slight lowering of the action. We've got 1047 strings, new ones. We've got a Tusq nut and a strap button that we're going to put on the underside of the heel. Yeah, that's it for this baby. I'm going to do a bit of measurement of the action because we're going to just try to improve it just a fraction on the action. So I'm hopefully zoomed out a bit. Let's see what I'm kind of doing. Something like that. Right. I suppose I have to. Oh, I'll write it on the board. Why not? So this will be surprising probably in its lowness. Lowness. I'm going to give that a 2.25 on the low E. Low E 2.25. That's pretty good for an acoustic. And 1.75 on the high E. Now, I think we can bring that down to 1.75 on the low E, and what we were taking, that's 50. 1.25, I think we'll go 40. 1 point. Well, actually no, let's keep it where, let's go to 1.5. So on this one it's minus 0.25, a quarter of a mil. On this one, at the 12, as I measure it at the at the last fret, and this one will be minus 0.5 as measured. Now I have a little formula that tells me what it should be from the saddle if that's what I'm wanting to reduce at. Some people go, why don't you do it at the 12th fret and then you can do it exactly by just doubling it? And I go, I don't like to use the 12th fret for my own silly personal reasons. You know, you have a way of doing things that you like to do and you want to stay doing it that way. So there. So what I'm looking for is I'm taking 0.25 times 1.3 is 0.325. 0.325. I'll never get it that accurate, but anyway. And this one is 0.5 times 1.3. Anyone with maths could do that. It's 0.65. Okay, so that's my aim, that's my target for reduction to a very good low playing first fret action. At the moment, the nut is almost perfect. In terms of height, but we'll recreate that by replacing it. So I think the thing we've got to do is we've got to take off the strings altogether first. Now I could get my screwdriver out and do the mechanical version of it. Oh, go on, why not? After all, that's what it's for. I've just strung up 10 guitars at home, not using a mechanical thing, just by hand, and it gives you sore hands. So on this I'm going to take off the nut, tap it off, replace it, or make sure that the new nut fits, and then fine tune it. And I'll use these strings to fine tune the nut. Now, before I do the fine tuning on the nut, I'm going to set the action and do that bit at that end, because the thing about when you reduce the last fret action, as I call it, it will make a difference to the first fret action. So I don't want to. I'm aiming, because Paul had it very, very low. I don't want to aim for it that low again and then find that because I've lowered the action, wherever you are. I've run out of space. That wouldn't be very good. So as always, when I'm replacing a nut, my first target, unless it's an adjustable one, in which case it's slightly different, but normally my aim, there we go, that's broken straight away. That's had it, you see. So I don't have a very good service now from this broken string. Thankfully, I have a spare dirty acoustic set over there. But I think for now, I'm going to remove the pegs, and I'll be ready to replace this broken string. So I just use these fret pullers just to help me lift up the pegs. Now, the reason I'm taking the pegs up, and I'll do a close-up in a minute, is because I want to be able to slot the whatsits. So I'm going to take all these strings out of the way. This one's, as you might expect, this one is being a pain. Doesn't want to come out. No, it does. Right. So this one we'll get rid of, and we'll just have to assume that the high E on this one's similar enough, because we haven't got any other acoustic high E's to work with. But there we go. So if I come down this end and we look at the bridge end of things, the Welsh bridge end. Trying to zoom in a bit. Whoops, a daisy. There we go. Sort of visual. Bloody hell. Smacked it with the mirror. That's not so clever, is it? That's trying to knock it off the grip, which you don't want when it's leaning over a guitar. Right, there's my thing. So I've got free rein access. And what I'm just going to do while I've got access to the bridge top, is I'm going to get my pencil and I'm going to mark a little line. So we've got the piezo strip under there. I'm going to mark a little ruler line where parallel to the, it's quite a little bit difficult to hold it in place. I'm going to make a line parallel to the saddle slot and kind of run it up there. So what it sort of tells us is that we can go, there's a little bit of a notch here anyway, but we can increase the notching up to that line, potentially even further if we don't think, but that's taking the low E as the start point, so that's parallel all the way up. If we want to, we can, I don't know what somebody's doing out there. If we want to, we can add a second line that we could say, right, if we don't get enough notching out of it, or sorry, yeah, enough change in angle, we can potentially sneak up to another line. Now I can sand those off lightly when we're done. So the next question you've got is, well, how do we put a useful notch in there? And here's one way you can do it. It's not a bad way to start it. It gives you a sort of straight run on it, which is a Dremel cutting disc, and we could do the same. I think I will use the second one. There's no point doing it twice, really. If we might as well just do it the one time we've got to do it. Now, so for the first thing, I'm going to end up using the Proxon thing, which is a bit mucky because it's got some goo on it from when the other day when I was buffing Bob's hemispherical fret ends, which I did on his Gibson J200, which was a nice, well, a different approach to fretting. But the reason I took it was because on that guitar, first of all, it was a vintage custom shop Gibson, and I really didn't want to go anywhere near that with the what's the word? With the end beveling file, which is a brutal beast. And usually end beveling files are great for when you're fretting a neck from new, and you're likely to, once you've fretted it, then you've got time to tidy the ends and do all kinds of touching up with nitro poly on the edge of the fingerboard. But if you're working with a vintage thing, you don't want to be going anywhere near it with this beastly file. particularly when there's not enough space to run the file anywhere near here. So the Gibson doesn't have the cutaway, so you can't even get to these frets. So you'd have to stop about here, and then you haven't got enough room to hand bevel these. So I chose to make them all hemispherical, and so they're really smooth and rounded. They do feel different. They stick out further because you get a little bit of extra length. So it's interesting. Yeah, an interesting little difference that I hadn't done before. And interestingly, as I did it, I got a new neck in for another customer through the post, and that new neck, interestingly enough, had so I haven't really got a right angle here to work with terribly well. I'll try and do the front of the bridge. Yeah, this new neck came in, and that was that had all hemispherical frets on it too. It had all hemispherical. I think I'm just being a bit faffy here. I think it's probably just better that I draw a freehand line to the front of this mark on these three. There we have it. So I'm not too worried about them being kind of ending up in a straight line. That's a small immaterial thing at this point. So this can often be scary for people. I get the dentist's Dremel out and I hold it like so. 2 hands please, and I'm looking down here. Now the problem with this is I can't, if I go from that to end, I can't get it flat. I can't actually get it flat anyway, so I'm going to totally mess everything around and come at it from the other end, which means I'll need to move you, my dear viewer. I had one of those messages, comments the other day from somebody. You know, in a funny sort of way, I know they're well-meaning, and they see my stuff and they don't like the way I'm explaining or talking or telling stories about something. And what they do is they say, I've got some advice for you. Why don't talk about your history or your life growing up. Why don't you just talk about what you did here to this guitar so that people like me can learn from you? And I think they think they're being very helpful in some sort of way, and actually it isn't really. Now the interesting thing about doing this notch is you don't really have a very good look at where you're going from and to, so you have to, don't worry about the sound, it's just transmitting through the guitar top. So you've got to do it and avoid hitting the back of it at the same time. So it's a bit of a tricky thing, and even when you do get it, you're not going to get very deep with this device. But that's not so bad because we'll deepen it with other things. And I'm trying to keep this sort of perpendicular to the center line. No, perpendicular, parallel to the center line. Well, that's about as far as I can get with this. But I've made the first impressions. I will probably need either this device or both my Dremels for the next stage, because I'm going to have to find another drill type thing to do the next bit. And I've got a few little options here. Anyway, yes. So the guy, I think it's a guy. The guy wrote this message to sort of be helpful, and sometimes I get the instinct to flame them or just delete the comment. And then I thought, well, no, I'll just write back and say, it might look like that to you. And then I sort of take some time to explain it, which may or may not be appreciated, and it's not the end of the world if it isn't. I don't know what you can. No, you can't see a damn thing, can you? Okay, again, 2 hands. So I've got a little bit of a sort of homemade drill bit on the end of here. It's not very drilly. But strangely enough, despite not being very drilly, it does actually drill, and we can get a normal drill bit in there. I don't have any of these little burrs that are small enough. I mean, I could do a bit of that, but it'll make a wider notch. I'm trying to keep it small. So what I'm actually doing is I'm using sort of broken off miniature drill bits. We've only got a little stump here to play with. Why don't I put you over there and you can see through my hands, maybe better. Anyway, oh, there we are, we can see. So I'll try and keep my hands out of the way. So I'm going to try and, no, it's not good. If I keep my hands out of the way, I can't see. Right, let's move along to the next one. Now the thing about these notches is unless you get them a bit deeper, they won't really achieve anything. Time to change bits. Yeah, they won't do much for you if they're not deep enough. So you've got to work them down to a certain level. Now sometimes you can use things like a little what's the word? That drill I'm thinking of. Now this is now not coming out, so I'm going to have to tap it. You can use such things as razor saw, that little thin saw business. Right, let's try and get this to come out. Come along, thank you. Right, standard drill bit. Yes, so you can use a razor saw. Now this one's too thin, so I need to switch devices. I'm not doing this very well. Switch Dremels. Yeah. So without there being an actual tool for this, there might be. I bet StewMac's made one, but I haven't got it. Without there being an actual tool, we're using a variety of approaches. Is this plugged in? It is. I'm going to hang it on its, where's its hook? I've got a little hook that helps, no that's the wrong one, I'll hang it on there. A little hook that helps me to just hold it in place so I don't have to support it all the way. And then we'll do it up. Yeah, I'm absolutely sure StewMac would have the exact tool for this. A acoustic guitar peg hole slotter. Right, now with my thing hanging there, I can also now do so. So you can see that's cutting nicely, even though it's an ordinary drill bit on its side. Fit in there, would you please? That's what the dentist does when you think he's finished and he turns it up. Speaking of which, poor old Claire had to go to the dentist today. Right, so now we have some notches, some good notches, some bueno notches. And I'm going to now very gently remove the, what do you call it, that pencil marks. There we are. And the great thing about that is tiny bit of finger oil, it goes back to normal. You can wipe oil on it as well. Okay, so there we have the adjustment, the slotting adjustment. Now, I think what we'll do at this point, we'll turn this round. We'll get rid of our, we'll put this back to this end for a minute. Which end are we going to go to? Yeah, let's keep it long view for a minute. So I'm going to zoom out. I'm going to put these little drill bits away for another such mission. So a combination of not perfectly intended for that job bits and pieces, but you can always make it work one way or another. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace the strings now, which, because they're coiled, they're always going to take a bit of sorting out, which is a bit frustrating, so sorry. Hello. And we'll just put them back in here with the saddle. Excuse me. Now the reason I'm doing this is I want them in place so that when I come to reduce the saddle by the amount I've specified, then we'll be able to quickly check that it's got enough brake angle. Now this isn't going to work unless I put that all the way through. New strings, I mean old strings being reused. They don't like it much. So I'm not going to do it up tightly because I want to take the saddle out in a minute, but just to begin with I want to be able to make sure everything's in place and fit the broken string or the new replacement temporary string. I mean if I didn't have an acoustic string, I'd find a, I don't know, B, electric B string or something like that. That would be fine. So the idea here is I'm hoping that all of these, I'm hoping the slot that I've cut will be suitable or will allow the reduction in action for all of these strings across the saddle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to I'm going to make it my point to take down this amount that I've marked up on the board as my intended reduction. I'm going to divide it in two in my brain and just visually do half and half and just see if it still works on the first half and judge the brake angle remaining, and then either do the second bit or don't, because there may be a limit that we reach where the slotting won't make any improvement, and at that point we just don't go any further. Okay, so string G. Kind of excited to put the back on that harmony arch top, but there's two things I would sort of do if I was doing it more seriously. I don't want to spend a ton on it, and because it's only ever going to be a 1960s arch top, kind of slightly metallic sounding acoustic guitar, but I don't want it to be dead and thrown away either. So I thought what I'd do is try and save the neck, because the actual neck itself, in terms of shape and playability, was apart from the fact it had these ups and downs, prominent ups and downs in it, it was actually quite well, it wasn't what I expected. I expected it to be permanently C-shaped and a permanent bend, but it wasn't. So I was able to well, basically I set it up with a temporary bridge, a very low bridge, which is what we'd have to have, and I just left it there for maybe 2 months to see if the neck actually went into an unlivable with bend or anything. And actually after 2 months it was under load, it was still in the shape I would want it to be in, and it kind of said to me, look, if you just sort out the hills and the valleys in this neck, it's not bending unduly under load, even though it's got no truss rod. You could probably get away with a playable guitar if you just leveled out the neck as you have it. And so I thought, right, I'll do that. So I planed it and sanded it, radius blocked it and so on. And then as my next intention was to glue up some of the cracked pieces of wood, and of course I started to find that it was more coming apart than it was staying together. So that meant it made sense to take the binding off, then it made sense to take the back off to check inside. And although the glue inside is probably dried up like a pharaoh's spittle, it feels still that it's holding the struts and the braces inside strong enough to continue to work. So I thought, well, I'm not going to literally take the entire thing into its component parts, that would be mad. So I will aim to glue the back on and tamp down any of the little kind of crinkles that it had before, glue it down with good modern tight bond, and then we'll refret the neck and sort of take it in stages and see if it ends up playing, which would be nice. That'd be nice. Sounds like the Fast Show. That was nice. Okay, so now before I go onwards, what we looked at is there's an arbitrary target, right? We're looking at a physical thing here. Will it allow us to do this? Well, if we take this down, we'll lose a bit of height and so on. So that's why I've created a bit more angle by allowing the strings to come up in that slot the way they are. So that will help it a little bit. But the question is, oh sorry, I'll look again. The question is, what amount of height do we have available here? And we can check that reasonably straightforwardly by putting, and again, it's not easy to do with one hand, so I won't. We can just check at the point where the E string goes over. We can just see if we keep it vertical. Okay, 1.4, and at this end we've got 2.13. So we're not going anywhere near that. So there's enough room to take the 0.3 off from the 1.4, and then there's enough room to take the 0.6 off the 2.3. So that's the next important bit, is check that we've got enough material above the bridge surface to do that with. We have. So now I'm going to go back to what I said, which was to begin to do the lowering of the saddle, but in 2 stages. And to do this, I'm going to need to make sure all of this is as slack as possible, and then ease the saddle back out. And it's quite difficult, because as soon as it gets low, you don't have an awful lot to grip onto. So if you grab hold of it, and see, it's dangerous, you start biting at it like that. It doesn't take long before you're before it's sticking underneath the strings, because they can be very loose and still grab the little notches. So I'm going to take this off to one side, and I'm going to mark up the adjustments I want to make. Go to my sanding board. Right, I don't know what you can see here. Let's give you a bit of a zoom out. There we are. So what am I going to do? I'm going to mark up on the treble side. I'm going to mark up 0.3. Now, absolutely isn't a hope in hell that I'm going to be capable of marking 0.3 on this, right? But I can look at it and go, 0.3, what does it actually look like? It looks like the thickness of the pen. Okay, that tells me something. Let's look at 0.65. 0.65 at that end, and that looks like a tiny bit more. Okay, what I'll do is I'll just give myself a visual mark, the thickness of the pen and a tiny bit more, those 2 things together as my guide. But rather than trust to that, what I'm going to do, if I can get this lined up in a way that will stay in place, rather than trust to that, I'm going to take a measurement of these. Actually, what I'm going to do is support this with another saddle because it's just falling all over the place. By the way, it's exactly the same, so if we mess up one, we've got another spare one. Right, so thickness of the pen with a tiny bit wider at the other end. So there's my mark, and believe it or not, that's going to be perfect. But the way to do it, to be safe, not sorry, is to ignore your mark and take two measurements to begin with. So first measurement is on the notch for the high E string, measures 3.88. Now let's do that again. I'm not convinced because it's quite a bit of movement there. Let's put it on the notch. 3.82. Okay, so on high E 3.82 and low E we're going down. Let's be different. Where's the low E notch? There it is. Just at the position of the low E notch. 4.78. And we're taking off 0.32 from there. So that would be 3.5 we want to get to on the treble side, and we're taking 0.65 off that one, which will be 4.65. 65, come on, 7, 8, 6, 5. That's 3, 13, 4.13. 13 is our target. So we add 65 to 13, 75, 78. Right. So that now tells me it's a better measure than trying to follow a line. Now the point is, I wanted to do this in two parts. It's going to be quite difficult to do this in two parts, but we could make a mark and say, well, halfway we're going down to 3.5. So what were we taking off the first one? We're taking off 0.32. 0.32, that's 1565, so we could stop at halfway, which is 365, and then here we're halfway between that, so it's 0.32. 0.32 is 0.32, yeah, 478 minus 0.32, 382 minus 0.15, 16. Hang on a minute. Let's just get this right. I need my calculator. Sorry about this. Brain's frazzled. Right, 3.82 minus half of the 0.3, which is 1.16, minus 0.16 equals 366. Is the halfway mark there. And then 16 again to 50, yes, that's right. Then 478 minus 0.32 equals 446. There's my halfway mark there. So that's the best chance I'm going to get at doing these halfways. Now, the question next is, how do we do it? Well, we're taking, it's interesting, we're taking twice as much off the treble side than twice as much off the bass side than we are off the treble side. So really that means a kind of press more on the bass side than the treble side, and that's what I'm going to do. And you've probably seen me do this before, but as I do it, I rock my whole body from side to side so that I can keep the saddle piece exactly level. That's working it quite quickly, so because of course the Tusq is quite soft. So we go here and we've got 377, so we're near halfway but not quite, and here we've got 455, which is again nearly. Now at this point I'm slightly going to start going off the perpendicular, so I've now got to concentrate on bringing it back to the perpendicular with a slight adjustment, so that again it's the bass side. I think we're about evens now, so I'm now going to concentrate on taking a little bit of material off, but just getting this to cut the thing perpendicular whilst taking a little bit more off. So I will stop, look at it, looks a bit better. Treble side, sorry, bass side is now 452, we're getting towards the halfway mark, and treble tie 376. We're getting towards the halfway mark. So again, I'm going to carry on, but I'm going to concentrate on straightening this up a bit. On the bass side, it's a little bit, still a little bit on the slant, so I've got to just even that out a bit more. Again, this is all sort of feel and experience coming into play here, because the aim, of course, is to get it all down, in this case, to our halfway mark at the correct 90 degrees to the floor of the perpendicular thingy. Anyway, low E, we're coming in at 442, we're there, that's the halfway mark, and high E, 370, we're pretty much on the halfway mark. Again, wondering, that's actually not bad, but that's the halfway mark. So before we go any further, let's put this back in. So you can see that when it comes to trying to do it with lines and stuff, it just isn't accurate enough to mark it. So it's the measurement thing that's really working here. So in here goes back in the saddle, and now our job is to tighten up strings. Now what's, you just think that's now sitting on the well, it's sitting on the first fret until the neck curves, because we've got no load on it. So we'll put it under load, and we shall see. But we'll get closer to hitting the first fret, because as I said before, the first fret gap was minuscule. So it's now sitting on the first fret, which is sort of to be expected. So I'm less worried about that for a minute, and what I'll do is I'll put a capo across there, because I'm not really too worried about losing that first fret. Paul's original action, as he knows, was so close to that. The action was so low on the first fret. Okay, we're still not bending the neck. Let's just check one more thing. And the relief on the neck is dead flat. So let's put it a bit more under load. Let's get it as close as we can to. See, these are just clearing the first fret with the load of the neck. Okay, so what I'm interested in now is to look at the break angle, and it's still okay, I would say. What I'm noticing is that this saddle isn't exactly the same width as this slot. There is a tiny bit of lean on it, but ideally it's not matched perfectly with the slot, and it's probably because it's Tusq, it's not the original. I suspect it's not the original because it doesn't fit as snugly as I would want it to fit. Anyhow, that's telling me that at our halfway mark, if we count in the fact that it's barely above the first fret, the question I've got is, can we go further, and do the notches allow us enough break angle? And you can see that it's possible on the high E, but we're taking very little more off that anyway. But it's possible. There is an angle there, and it's adequate at the low E as well, which is the saddle top is at the back of the apex is at the back of the saddle when you get to the low E. So I think that is doable. He said, losing focus. Don't lose focus. So we'll do that. And what I might consider doing is whether this thing needs a kind of well, let's look at the width of this afterwards. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take off the strings again, I think. So the neck's quite sensitive to the string loading. Obviously, it's bending to give enough relief. So I'm not going to worry about that till the very end. Well, that didn't want to do it, so okay. So I think we're done with this. These old strings. I think they're. Do we want to do it one more? Yeah, let's do it one more time. I'll steal a spare one from the other set, which is the G. So sort of. Actually, come. We'll use it. One more replacement while we're at it. Okay, so we're going to do the last little bit of careful sanding. So we were only ever talking about a very tiny amount of reduction in that saddle, or a reduction in the overall height as measured at the last fret, which is my preference. So it's, you know, it's a fine tune, that's for sure. So you can see it's reluctant to come out unless we just help it a bit. There we go. I will tighten up that G, replacement G, in a minute. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to complete this sanding, and then I'm going to knock off the nut and do the same. I'm going to fit the nut. I'm going to see where it ends up as in terms of the string height, and then we're going to do the same job effectively of measuring it downwards. We're going to measure the height, calculate the reduction, and measure the nut down until we can get it. I mean, without cut this, if you can cut the slots, you can get a bit more accurate to the height you want. I'm trying to avoid cutting the slots because I like to leave the Tusq slots uncut and unmolested. That's my target, so I try to be more accurate so I don't have to use the thing. What's the thing? Slot cutters, files. Right, so I know I'm heading downwards now in the second half of my two bits. I think we're pretty much balanced now, so we can just take it down in a straight line on both ends of the game, and we just check the seating. I'll check the measurements on either side, and we should tell us whether we're going down in the right thing. 437 down to 413 if you remember, and then here 356. So on the treble side, if I'm correct, on the treble side, it's telling us, changing its mind. Let's go back. Treble side 439. Hang on, what's going on here? Bass side. Why does this do this? It seems to have lost its mind. $429. Treble side. We weren't even at 429. This is weird. 501. What was telling me, like, what's going on? What's brain stop? What was going on before? A minute ago it was measuring correctly. We got to 446 and 366. Now it's not measuring correctly. What the hell has happened? Anybody? This is on the bass side. 496. We were only ever going from 478 to 413. How can it be 496? Holy cow. And on the treble side, we were... Right, I can't explain that. It may be that I didn't even reset the calipers in the first place, and I was working to an already, figure that was already in there, and I didn't reset to 0. It doesn't matter for now why that's happened, but it's really disturbing. We're at 437 on the treble side. And we're currently at Not possible. It's not possible. 5 to 10 on the bass side. And we originally were going to take 0.16 off the treble side, and we were going to take 0.32 off the bass side. So that would make this one 30, 21, 421 as we're currently reading, and it would make this one 478 on the bass side. And that's if we just trust it reading now. So we go from what it should read. If we trust it, we go 510 on the bass side. This is the bass side, yeah. 510, 510, yeah. And we're going 437, yeah, down to 421 and 478. So that's taking 0.32 off, and that's taking 0.21 off. I evened them out, didn't I? I did half and half, so I took them down at an angle. So it's still right. 421, 478. Let's do it. 421, 478. Okay, so I'm going to again take this carefully. And a little bit heavier on the bass side because we're taking 2 chunks of 0.3, if I remember correctly, and we're taking a little bit less off the bass side, treble side, sorry, but we want to take it down at the same point, same time. Okay. On the treble, sorry, on the bass side, we're down to 502 from 510, but we want to go 478, so we've got a bit more to go. Let's do some more, and we're running a little bit off the vertical there, so I'm going to have to train it back to the vertical deliberately, consciously. You know, there are machines you can buy for this kind of thing. I sort of trust the hand finish. Right, again on the bass side we're currently at 496. We've got 0.2 of a mil to go, and on that side we've got 0.2. So it's 0.2 on both sides. Let's see if I can find a cleaner bit of material to work on. So what did I say? 0.2 on both sides, but I just need the last bit to be lining up, straightening up the thing. So I don't have much run here, so I'm just going to do shorter dance from side to side. Whoops. Okay, good. The bottom is flat. Treble side, 4.34, 0.10 to go. Bass side, 4.89, 10 to go. That's good. Now we've just got to keep this on the flat and narrow. And the same pressure, equal pressure, both sides. That's good, that's good. I think now we're pretty much close to there. That's very, 78, 79, 433, slightly higher on the treble side. I'll do a tiny bit more with a bit of emphasis on the treble side. Like that. That's it. Treble side, target 421. Treble side, target 421. Actual 429. That's good. That's all I'm doing. So you can see how fiddly it is, but I think worth doing when you want to get accuracy. So we're going to have to repeat similar with the nut in a minute. And of course, to get the nut off, we're just going to tap it off. Let's put the saddle back in. And there we go. Let's take the strings off to the side, and we will chip off the nut, chip off the old nut, like so. Put that there for a minute. Hello, old nut. Like so. Lovely. Just check on the, make sure that any glue, there's a little bit of glue on the face of the end of the fingerboard, which would be handy to take off. A little bit hard to get in at it with the string still on, but it's well, it's probably just easier than taking them all off. Okay, now we'll go with this one. Now this probably may well be a fairly accurate drop in, but we'll see. So the aim will be to get it in place it for now. Is it sitting in the slot? Yes it is, that's okay. I'm not fixing it. I'm going to see, it may still be a bit tall, which is fine. I'd rather it was tall than the other way around. So the idea now will be to get this strung up. Wrong way. This is just sitting as a tiny bit, I think it's a tiny bit wide. I'll just measure it, and we may have to just take off a whiff off the thickness, otherwise it's going to sort of tilt back, which is what it's doing, because it's trying to squeeze in. Probably should have just done that first, but anyway. So again, this is where the calipers come in very handy. So we're going to measure. Reset them to 0. We're going to measure the thickness of this, 567, and the new one is 580. So it is a fraction wider thing here, chunkier. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to aim to take it down on the front edge. Let's just double check this one. 566. We want this one to come out the same. 581. Okay, let's go back a minute. Let's get the old thing. So you can see it's a toing and froing from the sandy thing. So I'm doing a bit of a rough sandpaper there. 578, it's 566 we want. So and then we'll fine tune it. 569, 567. Okay, that's good. So straight away, this should now sit more comfortably in the slot and not lean forward the way it was, because it was trying to squeeze in there. So next, so that's the front to back depth of the nut, as I call it. There you go, it's sitting in much better. So this is loose at the moment, but that's okay. We'll get sort of bone and tusk dust everywhere. Let's try to lean back again. It's interesting. Why is it doing that? No, we're in. We're perfectly in. It's just tilting it back. That's a bit weird. Let's just do it by hand and see. Okay, once it's held down, it doesn't rotate, which is good. Okay, so I can see straight away that we're quite low. We're almost the exact same height as before, which is good. Wow. So now we've got a low action. Now we've got 1.75. That was the target. And we've got just over 1.5. We could go a fraction down on that high E, but you know what? I don't want to mess with it, man. Now, what we'll just do is check the, use the those things, the metric things. Now, I know that Paul's original first fret action was actually lower than I would go. This is about 0.3, which is where I would, well, actually it's more than that, it's 0.4-ish, kind of where I want to be. But guess what, it's slightly more. So let's get what it actually is, and then we'll do the tiny adjustment down. This is where it gets dodgy, and I don't want to be losing the nut, because I've only got one of these. That's pretty much on 0.5 on the bass side. .5 on the bass side, and I think we're 0.3, 0.5 and 0.4, 0.5 and 0.4, and then I think the ones in between are, let's just make sure they're the same. They are so close. I don't want to put my hands on with the files. We could do a fraction down, but I don't want to do it, and I don't want to do it on the underside of the nut for such a tiny distance. I think we should leave it where it is. I think it's as close as anything can be without getting stupid and pushing it past the point where we lose a perfectly good nut because we're trying for impossible things. Okay, so let's make a decision. We are done on the bass side. Let's just check the relief on here with these strings on. It's practically none. I mean, it's flat, which is why that's doing that. So I think we need to give this a tiny bit of relief. Don't know what these strings are. I think we should put the other strings on before we do that. Okay, so it's time to take these off. And we'll glue the nut in place. going to try and see if we can. It's always a difficult one to get the nut glued on, and I like to have the ability to put some strings on, but I never quite figure out whether to have them all on, or let's take off the outer ones. Where's my thing, my cutting thing? Here we are. We'll lose the outer ones, and we'll hold on to the G and the D. The G, yeah, the G and the D. Oh, we'll use the G and the D just to stick the nut in place and hold it down. They're easier to get out of the way in some sense. Put off to one side, and then we've just got two to put on. Two to put on. Right, and then it's a bit of a clean up. Then we will give the board a wipe down and a re-oil. So, the glue. The glue. Give this a bit of more slack. Put it outside of there, put it outside of there. Good. So while I'm doing this bit, I'm supporting the nut slot as well as I can by the neck support thing there, which means I can sort of press down and be confident that nothing's going to move. So my main concern is to get the nut on centrally. So I'm going to put a little bit of, this one seems to have run out of, has it gone off, this glue? Let's put that on there. Now I'm going to put it on centrally like so. My main thing is to get the feel of it dead center, so it's smooth on either side, and I'm going to get these two strings into the middle position, and I'm going to tune them up. To make sure that's all seated perfectly. Right. Okay, leave that for a minute, or a short minute. Now, clean up after this. It's in good condition, nice and clean anyway. I think we just need to go over it with a cloth, clean cloth, and some naphtha. I'll move the camera in a second. Oh no, I can just jump across to the other view. Hurrah! Come along now. Get rid of all these bits. Yeah, it's a weird one. If you get caught out like that with the digital caliper, it's amazing. It's a bit like when something goes wrong in the cockpit of an airplane. You can very quickly lose track of what's going on and panic, and then everything becomes overload, perceptual overload. And even a silly little thing like that with the calipers changing, I'm thinking, what's gone on, what's happened, what's gone wrong? And the only explanation for it, oh, that's cool. Thanks for telling me about that. Let's try that again, shall we? Didn't even see that. I'm feeling that glue may be a bit past its sell-by date. Cut, rewire, rephrase. Yeah, anyway. Yeah, just a weird bit of overload. And the only thing you can do is to stop and think what could have possibly changed. And the only thing that could really have happened is that the thing wasn't set back to 0 when I started, and so that I added on, or it was set to a minus, and so I started off with less than there actually was, and it measured under, and so I was. But the important thing was then to realise that even though my start point was wrong, the measurements I was doing were consistent all the way through with each other. So it just meant that hadn't done anything wrong in calculating the amounts to take off. I just had a different baseline for starting from. And so it meant that as long as I didn't panic and I just reset the device and remeasured and then divided my amount again in two, because I was doing it in those two stages, it meant that I was on track. But very interesting to kind of lose sight of it and freak out for a split second, because it's really, you just don't know what's going on. How could I have got it that wrong? And then the thing you sort of say to yourself is, can this machine be that wrong? I mean, it's a digital caliper, and if the machine can be that wrong, what's the point of ever trusting any of them? You know, I've had dozens of these things, and they quite quickly break after not that long in use. But apart from that, when they're working, I've never had any reason to think that they're lying to me or just coming up with completely spurious dimensions that would, you know, cost me the project by just coming up, you know, putting me so far off the mark. So it's never actually done that. So I guess you just have to accept that it's probably not likely to be something that crazy, in which case it can only be the start point has gone wrong, and that's because I was careless or didn't look at it, didn't notice that I'd started off, like I didn't notice the nut had just fallen off while I was busy trying to take the strings off. But there we are. It did. I didn't notice, and I thought it was all in place. Right. So having done all of that now, it is now time to put some oil on the strings, give the top a little dusting, although it's never possible to keep it dust free, and then we can put on the new strings in a minute. So let's get the rag for the oil. This one can do it. And the oil is, people call it hydrating the guitar, which of course it doesn't do because it's not water. It might have some water in it, but it doesn't really hydrate it. Actually, I can't see it would have water in it because it would mix at all. But what you're doing is you're just darkening it, and it looks nice. We prefer a darker look. Things that look dry and tired, we don't like so much. So the oil is a pretty harmless way of making it look like a well-played old guitar. And of course the other way of making it look like a well-played old guitar is to leave the oil in there from the fingers in the first place. But you know, often the reason you do it is just to freshen it up. Not the case here, but often with guitars that people buy in and send to me, you know, they've understandably got the DNA from somebody else who's enjoyed the guitar for decades, and it's, you know, it's quite understandable that they prefer if it wasn't on there, and it's like a little fresh start. But if we didn't put the oil back on, it would look a little bit dry and arid. So here we are, D'Addario's. These are 1047s, so this is going to be a lesser pull on the strings, on the neck. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get ready a hex key that will fit in here. I'll find it's a US guitar, so I don't want this to turn out to be something imperial. Please don't make it something imperial. Oh, thank God for that. Now we are saying it's starting out on the previous strings. It's starting out flat. So I'm going to take a tiny bit, and I'm just going to guess, because that's all I can do for now. I'm going to guess 20 degrees of turn counterclockwise, which slacks in 95% of guitars, that slacks the truss rod off and allows the neck to curve more. I say in 98.5 whatever plus %. There are some guitars in the world where they literally work back to front, and so they can be quite a surprise because you think you've got a guitar, a truss rod that's broken. In fact, you've just got one of these bizarre ones that doesn't follow the code, and they do exist, and I've never been able to find out why they exist or who made the choice that any guitars should be like that, but somebody did, and they're out there, and when you least expect one, you'll get one in your workshop if you do this sort of work, and you'll be confused and think nothing's happening until you realize that it's working backwards and with a massive chunk of relief, pun intended. You can get the next set how you want it. Actually, that pun wasn't intended, I just capitalized on it as it came up by accident. Quick thinking, sort of make the most of it type of deal. Right. So the only thing I would say, Paul, if you're watching this, is with the slots, notches in here at the end, you have to watch out that the strings, the string winding knots, the little sharp bits tend to get stuck in there, so you need to just push them out the way sometimes, or don't cut them off completely short. Just you have to have a little bit of room to pull them back and then out, which is what I had to do a minute ago, if you remember. So first string going on. My method of stringing, Paul seemed to be strung pretty well, so this is for other people. My method of stringing is I go all the way through the peg, grab it at the first fret, pull it back 1 fret, and then start winding, if I get it the right way around. And then I hold the taut string and hold it over the loose one. So the loose goes underneath the first time round, and as it comes through, I just yank it up. And I keep this one taut, and as it keeps on turning, I now push the taut one, guide it below the loose one. So you can see that the held string has gone 1 over and 1 under, pretty much. And then that makes a nice little locking thing, and you can just snip it off right there, and it's neat and tidy. And then I'll do the other side and the middle one as well. The reason I like to do the middle ones is I hope to keep the nut pressed down so it doesn't want to ping off like it just did. Okay, so hold it. I have to change hands a bit here, so 1 fret back. Now I've got to hold it on the nut there, and I need to let out enough that the loose one here can go underneath, and if it isn't looking like it's going to go underneath, I'll just hold it like that and send it under first time, and then push, lift that spare bit, loose bit up, and push the held bit underneath it this time round, and then it should just come out. Now that 1 fret's worth translates into more windings, funnily enough, on the low strings. Not quite sure how that happens. So you'll go around a little bit further, it seems, if for that same 1 fret pull back. 1 fret back, loose, underneath, tighten. Caught me out. Skipped over the top. Right, hold on to it now. Hoik up the held string, loose string, direct the held string underneath it to lock it off. And this again is going around maybe nearly a second time round on the underside, but that's okay. So we'll do the high E as well. Again, hold it, one back, hold it. Lift it over the loose one. Press the held one underneath the loose one next time round. And actually cut it while you've got access to it. Seems to make sense. And then tighten. And then the A and the E. And we're done. So the thing about tuning stability is quite a few people I grew up thinking tuning stability was to do with the tuners, which is a very logical thing. I mean, why wouldn't you think that? They're tuners, they control the tuning. I don't have a reach for a minute. I'm struggling to get this to go under, that's better. Go under. There we go. Yeah, so I always thought that the tuners were what kept your guitar in tune, and that makes sense, but I learned since that it doesn't have anything to do with keeping your guitar in tune. The tuners, of course, as you see, what we're doing here now is they are all about getting your guitar strings tuned up, but something else decides whether your guitar stays in tune when you play it or goes out of tune, and those things are weirdly counterintuitive. And the first one, the way I look at it, is I consider them to be 50% responsible each. This keeps it simple. I'm just going to tighten this up too much for a minute to get the spare string around the side here. Cut it. Yeah, so I consider it as two things. First of all, it's the condition of your nut slots, right? That's vital. And so you want to make the nut the best it can be, and that means your slots need to be wide enough for the strings. They mustn't have friction. They must not grip the strings, because even the tiniest amount of gripping puts your strings out of tune in perpetuity, and you'll hate it as a result. So that's what we don't want. We don't want the gripping, the strings being gripped in the slots. And the way to avoid that is to use Tusq, or you can use bone, but you have to work really hard to get the bone nut slots to give up their friction. They seem to be much more susceptible to hanging on to the strings than Tusq, because Tusq is made with and new bone is made, well no, Tusq is made with a Teflon, new bone's not. Anyway, so 50% of your tuning stability is in your nut slots, which is why I go with Tusq all the time. It's also why I make absolutely every effort not to mess with roughen the slots. Make sure they're the right width. Beautiful. So 50% of your tuning stability is in getting that right. The other 50% is in getting your slack got rid of out of your strings, and that requires manhandling them. And people disagree with this sometimes, and I get people arguing, saying, "No, mate, you're talking nonsense. You're half killing those strings. You know, tune them up semitone, leave them there overnight, come back and everything's fine." Well, that's fine if that works for you. I'm working from my 8 or so, 9 years of doing this, and it pays off if you stretch them manually. You don't have to brutally stretch them, but make sure you stretch them manually. And if you do it until they don't detune anymore when you stretch them, then you can guarantee that under playing conditions they will stay in tune for hours. That's how much it went out of tune. That's cool. But let's see if we can get any more out of it. So once you get rid of all the slack. The beauty is that it stays in tune when you play it, and because the nut's right, the two things together mean that it goes into tune beautifully. You don't have to hunt for it like you do with other guitars. And then you just play it. There's a ping. That's a kicker, that guitar. Now, there was a little ping there, and I'm not going to attack it with the slots. It's once in all of the tunings, and I don't think it's going to present a problem. If it did it repeatedly all the time, then I would just widen it, but it'll change the look of the slots very slightly, or the one slot. It's very difficult to widen it without making it look slightly different to all the others. But with this final little stretch out, I'll be done. Then all we've got to do is put the strap button in the heel, and we're car outside, either that or a fighter jet. Lush. Okay, now the next bit, the final bit. Zooming out. Yeah, the bit of where we come to put in a strap button. So the strap button, it's not got a lot of room here, so I think it suggests it better be there. And the strap button has to go on the underside, either on the back there or the underside. That is a little thin, it's not like many guitars, so I think on the underside is better. Now the thing about doing it on the underside is more meat to get it into, but it does mean that your strap is going to end up coming to there. You can see it's going to come to there, and so technically your hand is going to hit the strap as you come and play up here, but it's wrapping round there, so it's a much stronger fix, and actually not many people spend a lot of time playing up there, and I know Paul said he didn't, so we're going to put it on the underside, but just a little thing to consider. The question of exactly where is really a sort of experience thing. I want to put it in line with, well, I want to sort of put it in perpendicular to the surface if I can, wherever possible. So it's down in there. It's going to be somewhere like here, and I'm going to put it there, and I'm going to go there. Boom. And I'm going to get me a screwdriver bit that matches or suits the thing I'm using. That'll do. Set the clutch bit right to begin with. I've got two foam felt doofers here, and I'm going to now actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to go with slight widening, where's it gone? Slight widening of the hole, because that's a 1.5 mil and that's actually a 3 mil screws. That's quite a big difference. So I've just widened that up a bit because what I don't want is the finish cracking or splitting. And now I'm going to gently ease it in. So rather than shoot away at it like that, I'm going to manually screwdriver it. In fact, I'll use this one so I can feel as it goes in. I want to make sure that it goes in nice and tight. It's quite a small strap button, and so you know, it's not got the world's most bite, but there we go. Yep. Lovely, job done. And the that unit on the end, the jack on the end is nice and firm as well, so that doesn't need tightening. And there we are, all done. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed that very slight adjustment and setup. Not a big deal, but I hope that Paul will appreciate that tiny bit of action reduction that we got out of that. And a complimentary strap button for good measure. There we have it. We're done. See you soon for something else wonderful in the world of guitars. Thanks a lot.